Welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership with your host, Stephanie Olson. I'm excited to introduce to you Tricia Roos. Tricia is a Dallas wife and mother who built a winning career in sports and high school admissions, but found her greatest victory in loss. Against the advice of medical experts, Tricia carried full term a child she was worried would die at birth or before. In that season, Tricia's team won every game. The child in her grew, and eventually she held and loved the daughter who wasn't supposed to live. And in 6 days of a brief and remarkable life, Annabelle Roos rewrote the medical chapter on a chromosomal condition, and she gave life to a story that has changed lives. And Tricia has written a book called When Wishes Change and is doing some amazing, amazing things. I had a great time talking to Tricia, and she's got an incredible story. So let's meet Tricia. All right. Hello, and welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership podcast. I am so excited to have Tricia Roos here with us. Tricia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, I know you're a Texas gal, yes?
Absolutely. Born and raised.
Good. I have a lot of Texas friends, so I admire that. All right. Well, you have quite a story and have lived quite a life, and you're doing some really great things. I'm just going to let you share your story, and I want to hear all about what you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll hear a lot of resilience.
Yes.
Sprinkled in there. So I recently published a book. It's called When Wishes Change. And the inspiration behind the book was something that happened to me in 2014. Essentially, my husband and I were wanting to have a second child. We had a very healthy, easy pregnancy with our first. And he came home one day asking for a lady baby because his friend at school, at daycare, had just gotten a baby girl sister. And, he just thought you go pick one up at the store.
Yep.
And so anyway, it got the conversation started, and I was pregnant a few months later, and everything was going great until a random doctor appointment. My doctor said I could do a blood test to find out gender, and I really wanted to do that. And so we did. And 10 days later, she called and let us know that I was having a baby girl, but that she tested positive for trisomy 18. And so most of the world is familiar with Down syndrome being trisomy 21, and trisomy 18 usually comes with more heart and brain defects with the child.
Wow.
And so we were advised to have an abortion, and just for us and our family, we couldn't bear that decision. We didn't want to have to make the decision of her life. And so we kept the pregnancy. And in the midst of all of this, I, for work, was working as the director of admissions at the largest co-ed Texas school, Catholic school. I was also the head volleyball coach, and I was a week away from the volleyball season starting.
Wow.
And my passion for coaching young athletes started really young. I knew somehow in my life I would be coaching. I loved, as I grew up, learning about coaching. I loved competition. I loved just learning about adversity and resilience and figuring out your way through obstacles.
Yeah.
And I found that this pregnancy was a really great opportunity to teach some of those lessons in practice with my volleyball team. And so I went into that 2014 volleyball season with a group of high school kids, just being really honest and vulnerable about what I was going through. And we had no idea how long she would live in utero, if she would even make it full term. And I just asked them to be there through it with me, through thick and thin, and to just work their hardest. And within those few months, I saw just something I'd never seen before in teenagers, just really selflessness and just working so hard for a bigger goal and a bigger purpose. And we ended up winning the 2014 state championship, and they dedicated it to my daughter's honor. I was still fighting through that pregnancy. I was still there, super pregnant, and somehow making it. And so she was actually born alive full term, which I was told we would have a less than 10% chance of making it that far.
Wow.
And then we found out that she had a 2-chamber heart. And so even if she was born alive, we knew that it would be a short lifespan. And there was really nothing that you could do. You can't build chambers in a heart for a 3-pound baby.
Yeah.
And when she was born, it took about 4 minutes for her to breathe. And when that happened, just this sigh of relief came over the whole room. We were a little bit of a spectacle in the hospital because she was actually the first live trisomy 18 birth that any of the doctors and nurses at the hospital at the time had
Wow.
experienced. So just getting to see her born alive was a pretty big deal for some of these doctors. And this little girl, if you want to talk about resilience, you talk about a baby girl that ended up living 6 days despite her heart condition and just the obstacles in front of her. And my job in that time was just to be there, to fight, to be as strong as I could and to take care of her and provide. And, you know, a lot of stories end with like a happy ending or it was a miracle and she survived and the diagnosis was reversed. And that just wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We knew she would die. We knew that the life was short, but we really took advantage of loving her and being there for her. And I found it in my heart, like probably the end of 2019, that I felt like this was something important to write about. And when I titled the book When Wishes Change, it was during the pandemic during 2020. So a few months later after starting this book, I and all of us experienced a lot of changes in our jobs and in our lives. And to me, the concept of when wishes change is a really deeper thought about when we wish something, when we've dreamed of something our whole entire life, or maybe we had a goal that doesn't come true or it doesn't come to fruition exactly how we planned it. We have to be able to allow our wishes to change and make a new wish. And so for me, when I found out this diagnosis, instead of wishing for a full life for my baby girl, it was just to make it full term. And then it became to make it through an hour. And then it became to make it through a day. And then every day after that, it was like, can we make it another hour? Can we do this again tomorrow? And I think that my athletic background, my coaching background, surprisingly, I think prepared me for those moments way more than I ever anticipated. And then last year, I chose to leave my full-time job. That was everything I had ever dreamed of and wanted to pursue speaking and writing and consulting and kind of create a new career path during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's really proven to be difficult at times. And I just think that, you know, I try to start every single day with being grateful and in my own brain, like just walking around the house and being grateful for my cup of coffee and for my kids and for, you know, the blessings and things around me. And that's really helped me to stay focused on my goals and what I'm striving towards. So I think there's a lot of probably resilience and things wrapped up into that story. But I really felt like writing about it and sharing with others could be really impactful to help people going through whatever situations that are difficult and what circumstances they may be in. You know, even if it's not directly relatable, the principles can be relatable.
Absolutely. And I think it's a beautiful story. And you know, personally, I have a different experience, but experienced something where I have lost four babies in utero. And I think the beauty of what you did in carrying that beautiful baby to term and having the joy and honor of parenting her for 6 days is incredible. And I think sometimes people don't understand how, I mean, that is just what an amazing thing for you.
Mhm.
And I personally think that is um, an incredible, incredible mom. So I just thank you for your story very
Yeah,
much.
thank you. And I think one thing that's really important through my writing was that it was really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so I think as we're dealing with difficult circumstances, um, just being open that I was angry, I was
Yep.
confused, I was mad, um, at all the things around me. I had bad days, I had decent days, I had days where all I did was cry.
Mhm.
And I think that now there's something about the last 6 months for me being right at 7 years
Yeah.
past that experience. It's given me an opportunity to look back on it and see what I really went through, and it's almost like surprising to myself, right? Like
Right.
I went through an entire pregnancy every day waking up. Are you alive in there?
Yeah.
Are
Not
you
knowing.
yeah, what's going to happen next? Would I be caring for a child with special needs for a long period of time, a short period of time? I mean, there were so many what ifs that could have come out of that situation. And I just stayed the course. I
Yeah.
stayed prayerful and faithful, and I attempted really hard to connect with people that could relate to my situation, that had maybe been through it before, to guide
Mhm.
me and help me to understand what to expect to the best
Absolutely.
of my ability. And I just took it one step at a time. And you can always look at it in hindsight and be on the other side of that valley and be like, dang, that was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And be proud of what you went through. But with that said, there's always something on the horizon, right? That's going to come up and challenge you. And I think that while we're having good moments in our life, we almost have to prepare for maybe something bad by making ourselves just stronger people.
Yeah. And you mentioned faith. Your faith was extremely important, and it definitely was in mine. I think when you have something, when you know that God is a part of this, and you
Mhm.
know that his hand is on it, regardless of the circumstances, there's a hope in that
Yes.
that that is so important. Would you speak to your faith at all and how
Oh,
that helped you?
absolutely. You know, I had this is kind of random, but I had a dream really early on in the pregnancy, and it was very weird. It was my childhood dog that was talking to me like that was
Oh,
completely normal. She was like my best friend my whole life. And I kept getting this message that I would be abundantly blessed and that there was greater purpose to all of this.
wow.
And, you know, in the last 7 years, I think about the hospital and the difference in now someone having a trisomy 18 baby, and then they completely changed the care and their protocols. I think about just different people that have read the book and have been impacted, or
Wow.
other mothers that I've been able to talk to. And to me, even if I positively impacted one person,
Yeah,
it brings purpose to the pain,
that's right.
and you can have a better understanding of like the bigger picture. And
Yeah.
after Annabelle, I did have another baby. 6 months later, I was pregnant again,
Wow.
and she's my little rainbow. She's a hot mess, curly, curly, blonde hair, out of control.
Hey, I have
Um,
one of those.
speaks her mind about everything. But I wouldn't have probably had her if
Yeah.
it wasn't for Annabelle, because we live in a small house. Like we were planning on having two children. And so I just think that this was the way that my life was intended to be.
Right.
And when you're a little girl dreaming about your family one day, you don't dream about having a baby that dies. You don't
Yeah.
dream up tragedy or loss or disappointment. You
Yeah.
think about all those dreams coming true. And one of my markets I love to speak to are high school students and college
Mm,
kids, because it's like this delicate tightrope. We say you can accomplish anything and all of your hopes and dreams will come true, but it really isn't that easy.
no,
And
it's not.
my sweet 10-year-old, is consistent with either the NBA or the MLB. He can't make up his mind.
Well, he's got
And
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he does have time. And you want to support wishes and dreams, but then you also want to be able to help pick kids up when
Yeah.
it doesn't go that way, or when life hits them in a way they never expected, just
Yeah.
because it's like so overwhelming when your dreams don't come true. And so much of that does happen when you're young, when you're, contemplating your career or your spouse choice or
Right.
where you're going to live. Those are really monumental choices that impact the trajectory of the rest of your life.
Right.
So I think it's fun for me to speak to that audience, even though they haven't had a child or experienced loss. It goes back to that central message of um, using my story to explain how wishes can change.
Yeah.
And despite something bad happening in your life, it can be turned into something good.
That's right. And we don't know the end of the story.
Yeah,
And
still don't.
yep, yep. And that's the beauty of it. I always think about, when you look at the stories in the Bible and you think, well, why didn't Moses do this? But they didn't know the end of the story either.
Yeah,
And it's so important that we hold on to that and just, okay, I trust you. I trust you.
yeah.
And that's hard. So, can you speak? You talked about how those high school students really walked through that pregnancy with you, and I'm assuming they really walked through the loss with you as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I had the whole school at the funeral. It was very
Oh,
close to the heart of the community because actually, to back up a little bit, after the diagnosis and after me announcing this pregnancy and what we were going through to literally everybody, I
mhm,
did not want to retell that story 8,000 times.
right.
So I just got it out there. The Texas Catholic, which is kind of like a news, they do articles,
Hmm.
videos here in Texas. They approached me and asked if they could make it into either a video or a documentary of
Wow.
sorts. And I said yes. And so I had a film crew following me around for 7 months. I mean, even
Wow.
post pregnancy, and they did make it into a documentary. And so they had hundreds of hours of footage, and it was really cool. Like after the fact, it took me years to want to do this, but I did get a copy of the hard drive with the footage of their interviews and all the people that they talked to. And one thing that was really interesting was that some of the parents on my volleyball team expressed concern because their kids had been essentially so sheltered in their lives to where they'd never experienced firsthand something like this.
Yeah.
And so they said, we weren't sure how we felt about her being so open and sharing and being so vulnerable because this was something that could trigger our kids and scare them. And, they're teenage girls and they haven't gone through that. But then, in post interviews, I think it was unanimous that everybody was grateful for getting to walk that journey
Yeah.
because of the greater life lessons. And, I still keep in touch with, the whole team, so many of the players that I was very, very close to. And it changed their lives. I mean,
Yeah.
it changed the way that they think about things. And now, if you think about it, those girls were, pretty much 15 to 18 years old in 2014. So now they're getting married. Now they're considering children of their own and their own families. And just kind of knowing that they will experience either firsthand loss or miscarriage or through their friends and
Yeah.
maybe be able to be a better resource than they would have been without experiencing that. It's like the rock in the water and the ripple effect of how our choices and decisions can affect other people, and then
Yeah.
they affect other people and they affect other people. So I think that it's just cool how I was able to watch even teenagers be selfless and hardworking because practice was like our safe haven and it was my
Right.
release. And usually teenagers are somewhat dramatic.
What?
And I know it's shocking to hear. So if you're listening and that surprised you, I'm sorry if you swerved off the road. But yeah, they're a little self-centered sometimes. And in that season, there wasn't an ounce of that. And that I think contributed to winning a state championship. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really hard to do in any sport. And it's a huge accomplishment, but you can't do it without the help of others.
That's right.
And when they were just completely selfless and resilient and hardworking and committed themselves to being present all the time and releasing all their other drama and baggage for the sake of the team and for my health and sanity.
Yeah.
And I mean, I jokingly would hold it over their head. You told you, if my blood pressure goes up, my doctor's not going to be happy, and this baby's not happy. So,
That's
like,
right.
you need to increase the lead so I can sit back down and stop, storming around on the court. But they were great spirits about it,
I love that.
and we have our state championship rings that were engraved, that just said Annabelle's Army. So it was kind of
Oh
like
my
this
gosh. I love that.
cool, like, group that was all in something together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's through adversity we grow.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really striking comment that you make. In my real job, I run a nonprofit, and we do prevention education on human trafficking, social media safety, and healthy relationships. And we go in the schools. And, we are speaking so often to kiddos who are struggling I mean, and we speak to the ones who are not as well, but it's the ones who have learned how to live through that adversity, how to deal with those things that, it really does help us in growth as human beings, because if we're sheltered from everything,
Mhm.
we're not going to know how to handle anything.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful that you
And
said
I
that.
even think, so one thing that struck me that this specialist said when we found out the diagnosis was, have an abortion because this might be too hard on your son. And it might
Wow.
be too emotional for him to go through this. And you wanted him to have a sibling. Why don't you just move past this pregnancy and go to the next one?
Wow.
And that really stuck with me, that it would be like my child would be used against my
Yeah.
other child.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, like, my son Cameron will confidently tell you that he has two sisters, one on earth and one in heaven. And although he has experienced loss, he remembers it. I mean, he
Sure.
was almost 4 years old, and we do talk about her a lot, but there are certain things that he really remembers. And it was very difficult for him. However, two things come to mind. Like, God talks about having the faith of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And for him and his little brain to process this, we said, we may not get to keep her because she's not 100% healthy and God may have to take her back to heaven.
Yeah.
He comprehended that. He took that in
Wow.
and he took it to heart. And he's like, she's in heaven because she's healed. And then second of all, I just think, we had a videographer at our church that followed our story right after and during her birth, and then
Wow.
just a few weeks ago. And I told him, I was like, I want you to mark your calendar for probably 15 years from now when Cameron is 25. Like you said, the story continues. I know that this impacted him in ways that will be measured far years from now, because he is so, like, conscientious about kids with special needs, and he just has a different understanding about life and death that most kids his age haven't experienced. And whether he becomes a doctor and creates a cure, or he becomes a teacher for special needs, or he has some kind of impact in the world, I believe that the experience he went through as a child will shape, his future.
Absolutely.
And so when we try to shield children from loss and tragedy, I mean, we want them to be in a bubble and safe, but we have to let them know, like what you're doing, what exists out there,
Right.
and what happens, and how to deal with that, because we have had to help Cameron deal with loss.
Yeah.
And he's had to experience it for himself. But he's a stronger human being, just like we are, for going through it. And
Yeah.
I would never have it any other way.
I absolutely love that. I talked to on my podcast, his name is Joe Templin, and he wrote a book on resilience. And one of the things he said, and I'll probably butcher this and then he'll reach out to me and yell at me, but sorry, Joe. One of the things that he said, though, is we need to sometimes choose the difficult things in life over the easy things,
Yeah.
because when the difficult things come, we'll be prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important. And I think that today we're seeing a lot more um, of parents really trying to remove the difficulties from their kids' lives. Or it's the same thing as, hey, everybody gets a medal for just
Yeah.
showing up,
Yeah.
and I think that when we try and remove those difficult times, we're really doing a disservice to our kids, because again, it's through that adversity that we grow and that we learn. And as somebody who has a faith, that we can see what God can do in our
Mhm.
lives, even if it's not the way we might do it,
Yeah.
and I think so. I commend you as a mom for um, doing really what was best for both of your children at the time.
Mhm.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, the being a coach now versus when I started over 20 years ago is so different.
Mm.
And I refuse to compromise like my beliefs and the way that I coach.
Yeah,
I definitely adjust to different personality types. I know a
sure.
lot about learning differences and how auditory processing may work. Like there are ways to coach kids differently, but this whole sugarcoating truth, they call it
Yeah.
the sandwich method. Like you say something good and then there's like the criticism, but then you end it with good. And they're like, well, am I doing good or am I not doing good? And that is
You have to be
so,
real clear with the sandwich method, that's for sure.
yes. And I'm like, I'm going to be loving to a T and love these kids with
Yeah,
everything I have, but I'm going to be really honest too,
yeah,
because I want people to be honest with me. And if you're truly like an athlete that's being taught to persevere and deal with adversity, you have to be able to deal with honest criticism. And
right,
that is such a life lesson for later.
right.
People that are non-confrontational in the workforce are the worst. Like that's part of the reason I left my job, because
Yeah,
I had a non-confrontational manager who refused to talk to me and about certain things that needed to be talked
yeah,
about. And that's not my style. Also like with athletic background, you don't usually take things personally. You just kind of like get past it. And it's not a way to function in the real world, in your
no,
marriage, in your relationships with your kids, with your coworkers. Sometimes you just have to do hard things and deal with things head on instead of
right,
ignoring that they exist. So I do
yeah,
think there's a lot in that to learn as a child, and how we teach our children that will make them successful human beings later in life. And that ultimately is the goal. We want them to
right,
be happy, healthy, joyful adults that can
yes.
handle themselves, and we don't have to step in when they're 30 years old and
Kick them out of the
something's
basement.
happening,
Yeah,
yeah, at work, or they're still living
right,
with you or whatever. Like
right.
handle
Yeah,
your own.
that's right. Oh, that's so good. I love that. So tell me about your consulting today. What are you doing in the way of consulting?
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. So
Good.
I love problem solving and I love being innovative with ideas. And, I was pursuing the book, I was pursuing public speaking, and then I was actually approached by a director of a club through LinkedIn because he was looking for someone to hire as a director of coaching and recruitment.
Oh,
And I love the idea of coaching coaches,
yeah.
because I think with my experience, I'm at that point and I love it. And so I started a consulting business because I said, I really want to do this part time, but I also have this other side I can't let go that's in consulting and education. So I actually work with a group of consultants called the Gowan Group. But the other partners are all like previous heads of schools, or some kind of leadership roles at
Right.
private schools. And especially with the pandemic and how fast we're changing, and now we've got your millennial parents having their kids getting older, there's going to be a very different way to communicate with
Yeah.
them. And so the consulting piece is getting the opportunity to work with people all over the country and just saying, how can I help you with
Yeah.
the knowledge and understanding that I have, and research what's going on in their world, in their admissions offices, and just be a resource and guidance to help them get out of some hard times.
Yeah.
Because a lot of private schools, I've been in the Catholic school system, they're just a little old school, right, with their marketing and their branding and their development,
Mhm.
or they were so used to this funnel of students just naturally
Right.
matriculating in. And it's a really competitive market now with so many magnet schools and other competition in the market. And I worked at a school, you can get lost in the weeds really easily
Yeah.
because, like you said, there's these poor children dealing with anxiety and depression and, all this peer pressure and things that they're living through that we didn't
Right.
live through in the
Right.
same way, that they drown in it
Yeah.
and they can't look up at the big picture. And then before they know it, enrollment goes down.
Yeah.
Um, so I always tell people I have 4 jobs because I'm writing another book, and then I'm trying to market my current book and my social media channels, and then I'm doing the volleyball and I'm doing the consulting.
Oh, that's
But it
fabulous.
speaks to all the things I love to do. And so as long as I time block and manage myself and wake up every day being thankful for what I have going on, I'm going to stay the course and keep pursuing it.
I love that. I totally want to be your best friend. I think
Let's do it.
you you are amazing. And there is so much that I can relate to what you're saying. And it's such important work. So kudos to you. So now you're still coaching high school volleyball, correct?
No, so when I left the school,
Okay.
that was part of and that was the hardest thing for me because
I'll bet.
still am really close to those athletes. But what I saw happening in my life was my 10-year-old and my 5-year-old now have their own activities and Girl Scout meetings and basketball games, and I need to be present. So of course I get roped in
Yes, you're
to
a coach.
coaching 5-year-old basketball. My team is called the Wild Kittens,
Oh, I love it.
and they are wild kittens. But I'm using my coaching skills. I help with my son's teams any way I can. And then this role at this club volleyball program as director of coaching, I also show up whatever days I schedule, and I get to work with all the teams and all the
Oh,
athletes.
that's fantastic.
So instead of just one group of girls I get really close to, I can definitely say just in the last few months, I'm probably really close and have a really great understanding of probably like close to 100 girls.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
from little tinies, like the 3rd and 4th graders starting off all the way to the older girls. And I love all stages of youth where they're self-conscious and they're going through puberty and they're
Yes.
learning, and then the other end where they're picking their college and their careers. So it's been different, but it's been a lot of fun. I think coaching is in my blood, and and that's part of consulting is coaching
Yeah,
also,
absolutely.
talking people off the ledge
Yeah,
and guiding them through the trials of the pandemic and everything else. So
absolutely. Yeah, I love that because when you look at youth, and especially today, I think having that safe adult in their life, and we don't have to be the adult. We just have to be one of the adults that provides those my one of my good friends calls them those gentle nudges.
yes.
And those are the things that get us through to those places of resilience and victory and things like that. That
Well,
is,
and even though I'm a coach, I still have to call my son's coach and say, hey, man, can you help Cameron with this? Because
yeah,
he's really self conscious about his batting. And I just wanted you to be aware of that because he respects his baseball coach as a male in his
yep,
life who has taken him under his wing and is such an amazing role model. And I know it comes differently from him. And
yeah,
so many times over the years, the parent calls me, hey, my daughter's struggling with this or a relationship issue or whatever. She does not want to hear it from me.
mm-hmm,
So if you could just, talk to them about it or bring it up, I'd appreciate it. And I love having that role because they do see me differently than a parent.
yep,
And my son
absolutely.
sees his coaches different than he sees advice from me. I mean, God forbid I say a word about his
Oh,
basketball shot or his swing in batting. It's not my job. He, wants it to come from the coaches.
absolutely. Well, it's so funny because we go into the classroom with our presentations, and I'll tell parents all the time, look, it's not you. You can say the same thing for 5 years. We walk into the classroom, say it one time, and they'll be like, you would not believe what I just heard. I mean, that's what being a parent is all about. You
Yes.
don't get to, yeah, you don't get to be the one.
As long as you can understand that and not have your feelings hurt about it, you'll
That's
get
right.
through parenting just fine.
That is right. Oh, I love it. You have such an amazing story. And, it's just so clear that God is using you to make a difference in people's lives and change their lives for the better. So I thank you so much for what you're doing. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, a couple different ways. So, I have the book When Wishes Change on Amazon and anywhere else you buy your books. It's pretty easy to stick it in the cart. And it's an easy read. And I think that that just theme of resilience and getting through a hard time and allowing your wishes to change is really woven in there really well. I also have a website, When Wishes Change, and that's fun because like under the author page, I have that documentary that I mentioned. There's a 2-minute video of the finals, like the state championship game that we won.
Oh, cool.
So I have real footage of all the things that are talked about in the book. A lot of people like to go to that after they've read it because it is a real story. All of it's true and is documented on film. And then my social media platforms, I'm really big on finding inspiration through social media and encouragement. And so I try really hard through Facebook and TikTok and Instagram just to offer encouragement through scriptures, through inspirational quotes and things like that. I'm trying to do more giveaways, for the book or for other things, which I think is always fun. And with consulting, I'm at the Gowan group. So it's kind of like I said, a mixed bag of things that I'm doing, but I love it. And I think that when you have purpose and passion behind whatever it is you love to do, it just makes life a little bit sweeter.
I love it. I love it. So last question, what does resilience mean to you?
To me, it's just getting through like step by step. It's a process of just putting one foot in front of the other and persevering through hard times.
Yeah.
Because if you look too far ahead, it's just too overwhelming. You have to just take it one step at a time.
It really is. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Tricia. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I appreciate you and your story and what you're doing. And I would love to have you as a guest again sometime, and we can see how your journey is going. But you're doing great things. So
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to Resilience in Life and Leadership. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Please share with anyone you think will benefit from this podcast.